Welcome to the 10th and final episode of our adaptation of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's first Sherlock Holmes story, A Study in Scarlet, here on BeFM Drama. A seemingly impossible murder of an unmarked man in a room full of blood has been worked through to its startling conclusion, and all that's left are the final details of Holmes's brilliant investigation. Dr. Watson is eager to learn the details, and as he does, so shall we in this final episode of A Study in Scarlet. We had been warned that we would need to appear before the magistrate that Thursday, but when the Thursday came around, there was no need for our testimony. Jefferson Hope had been summoned before the ultimate tribunal, where a more perfect justice than any on earth would be handed down to him. On the very night after his capture, the aneurysm in his heart had burst, and he was found the next morning stretched on the floor of his cell with a gentle smile on his face, as though he had been able, in his dying moments, to look back upon a productive life and a job well done. The next evening, I sat with Holmes in the sitting room of 221B Baker Street, and we found ourselves working over the case that had consumed us for days.
Gregson and Lestrade must be furious about Hope's death. Now they'll be missing all the attention a sensational public murder trial would have brought them. Where will the grand advertisement be now?
I don't see that either one of them had very much to do with his capture.
What we do in this world is of no consequence at all. The only thing that matters is what we make other people believe we have done. But never mind. I would not have missed the investigation for anything. Simple as it was, there were several most instructive points about it.
Simple?
Well, really, it can hardly be described as otherwise. The proof of its basic simplicity is that without any help but a few ordinary deductions, I was able to put my hands upon a criminal within 3 days.
Well, that is true.
I've explained to you. What is most unusual in the case is more often a help than a hindrance. In solving a problem of this kind, the most important thing is to be able to reason backwards. That is a very useful skill, but few people practice it well. In everyday life, it is more useful to look ahead. There are 50 who can reason synthetically for one who can reason analytically.
I don't quite follow you.
I hardly expected that you would. Let me see if I can make it clearer. Most people, if you describe a sequence of events to them, will tell you what the result will be. They can put those events together in their mind and argue from that something will happen. There are few, however, who can take a result and work backwards in their own minds through the steps that led up to that result. The power to do so is what I mean by thinking backwards, reasoning analytically, as I call it.
Ah, now I understand you a little better.
Now, this was a case in which we were given the result and had to find everything else for ourselves. Now, let me try and show you the steps in my reasoning throughout the investigation.
Go ahead. I'm eager to hear how you worked it out.
When we first came to the site of Jerba's murder, I approached the house on foot with my mind entirely free of preconceptions. Naturally, I began examining the roadway, and there I saw clear the marks of a cab, which I confirmed must have been there during the night. I proved to myself that it was a cab by the distinctive narrow width of Hansom's wheels.
So the cab was your starting point. Go on.
Yes, everything began with the cab. Next, I walked slowly down the garden path, which was made of clay and particularly suitable for preserving footprints. No doubt it appeared to you as a trampled line of slushy mud, but to my trained eyes, every mark on it had meaning. The art of tracking and tracing footsteps is one I put enormous importance on, and careful practice has made it second nature to me. I saw the heavy marks of the constables, but also the tracks of 2 men who had passed through the garden much earlier that morning. It was easy to tell that they had been there first, because in places their marks had been partially buried by the new ones. In this way, my second link was formed, confirming that there were 2 visitors in the night, one remarkable for his height and the other well dressed, to judge from the elegant impressions left by his expensive boots.
And when you went inside to view the body,
my well-booted man lay dead before me. Therefore, the tall man had done the murder. There was no wound on Jerba's body, but the horrified expression on his face assured me that he had seen his death coming. Men who die from heart attacks or any other sudden natural cause never exhibit that sort of agitation on their features. When I sniffed the dead man's lips, I picked up a slightly sour smell and knew he'd been forced to take poison. The hatred and fear on his face showed he hadn't done so willingly. No other theory could account for all the facts. The forcible administration of poison is by no means a new thing in criminal history.
I followed you this far. on the physical evidence, but how could you have possibly determined the motivation for the murder?
Ah, the reason. Robbery had not been the objective. Nothing was taken. Was it politics then, or a woman? Those were the possibilities in my mind. I immediately suspected a woman. Political assassins are happy to kill and then disappear without fuss. This murder, on the contrary, been done deliberately. It bore the marks of something staged, something thought of for a long time. It must have been a private wrongdoing to call for such methodical revenge. The racha on the wall only made it more certain. It was too obviously a misdirection. When the ring was found, it settled the question. Clearly, the murderer had used it to remind the victim of a dead or absent woman. It was here that I asked Gregson if he had sent a telegram to Cleveland. I wanted to know if he had asked for any details about Dreba's history, but he had simply reported the man's death.
I remember that.
I made a careful examination of the room, which confirmed the murderer's height and other details, such as his cigar and his long fingernails. Since there were no signs of a struggle, the blood which covered the floor must have burst from the murderer's nose in his excitement. I could perceive that the spilt blood coincided roughly with his movements around the room. Men rarely bleed like that from excitement, except when their blood pressure is very high, so I made a guess that the criminal would probably have a red face. Events proved me correct.
Hope's aneurysm, yes.
When we parted ways in the cab after leaving the house, I did what Gregson had neglected. I telegraphed the Cleveland police and asked for public information about Enoch Dreba's legal history. The answer was conclusive. Dreba had once applied for protection from a man named Jefferson Hope. I learned from the Cleveland police that this Hope was rumored to be in Europe. I knew then that I had the killer's name, and the only thing that remained was to secure him.
And so, within several hours, you had a suspect named.
Quite so. I had already determined in my own mind that the man who had walked into the house with Dreba was the same man who had driven their cab. The marks on the road showed me the horse had wandered a little, which would have been impossible if anyone had been in charge of it. Where then could the driver be other than inside? It is absurd to imagine a sane man would carry out a murder while his cab driver waited for him outside. And besides, if a man wished to secretly stalk someone through London, how better than a cab driver? I was certain Jefferson Hope would be found among the cab drivers of the metropolis.
They can go everywhere, and no one ever looks twice.
The perfect cover for Mr. Hope. I knew he'd still be working after the murder because quitting suddenly might draw unwanted attention, and there was no reason to believe he'd be using a false name. Why should he change his name in a country where no one knows him? I organized my children's volunteer police corps and sent them systematically to every cab company in London, asking for Jefferson Hope until they'd found him. You know well they succeeded, and how quickly I took advantage of it. The murder of Stangerson was one incident which was entirely unexpected. But through his death I came into possession of the pills I had suspected but not found with Dreba. Now you see the whole thing as a chain of logical sequences without a break or flaw.
Wonderful. Your merits should be recognized. You should publish a story of the case. If you won't, I will do it for you.
Ah, you may do what you like, Doctor. Read this article in the Echo.
The public have been denied a sensational trial by the sudden death of Jefferson Hope. The fine details of the case may never be known, but it is reported that an old lovers' feud in America may have played a role in the killings. Even if this case has no other effect, it at least brings to our attention the striking efficiency of our police detective force. It is an open secret that credit for Hope's capture belongs entirely to the well-known Scotland Yard officers Lestrade and Gregson. The man was apprehended, it appears, in the rooms of a certain Mr. Sherlock Holmes, an amateur who has shown some talent in the detective line and may, with such instructors as these, someday hope to gain a degree of their skill. It is expected that an award of some sort will be offered to the two officers in recognition of their service.
Didn't I tell you so when we started? That's the result of all our study in Scarlet, to get Lestrade and Gregson a police medal.
Never mind. I have all of the facts in my journal, and the public shall know them. In the meantime, you must content yourself with your fee. Like the Roman miser once said,
The public hisses at me, but I applaud myself in my own house and contemplate the coins in my strongbox. You're right, Doctor. Gregson and Lestrade may take all the credit, but they certainly pay well enough. Come along, then. Let's have a drink. A toast to our success. And then we'd better have some rest. There's plenty more work yet to come.
And with that, we've come to the end of our adaptation of this wonderful story, Arthur Conan Doyle's masterful A Study in Scarlet, which first introduced the world to the iconic partnership of brilliant detective Sherlock Holmes and his faithful companion, Dr. John Watson. It's been a pleasure bringing this story to you here on BeFM Drama. I look forward to joining you again next week as we present an entirely new tale from the case file of the literary legend Sherlock Holmes. From BeFM Drama, this is your host, Joshua Cornwell, signing off.